I'm John Travis in Novato, California on the 28th of October, 2020, talking to Jerry Wylie in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And Jerry was one of the few remaining Wellness Resource Center staff people that I can find and agree to interview. But we're going to start with who you are and why, and where you were born, what led you to crossing our path in 77 probably. So
Yeah, it was right around there. Uh, well, I was born here in Coeur d'Alene. My mother was born here in Coeur d'Alene in 1920. And I was born here in 41. And I ended up in Seattle working in the financial district. And then several of my friends had moved to San Francisco. So I followed them down to San Francisco. And again, I worked in the financial district down there, working for customs house brokers. I wasn't happy with, I was good at the work, but I wasn't happy working in the financial district. And one of my clients was Sundance Incense and Trading Company, located on Haight Street in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up working for them as a business manager, which was primarily bookkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for a couple years or so, and then I quit and just traveled for 6-8 months or so around the United States, mostly in the South because it was wintertime.
Smart.
Yeah. And then returned to San Francisco and got a job at the Association for Humanistic Psychology.
Oh, AHP. I didn't remember that. Okay.
Yeah, that's how I stumbled onto the wellness. I forget, was it originally called the Wellness Center?
Resource Center.
Okay, and then didn't you change the name later?
When we closed the center, we incorporated as a nonprofit Wellness Associates, but that was in 1980.
Okay, so Wellness Resource Center. Anyway, to begin with, I was just doing some volunteer work.
Let's go back to what were you doing at AHP? And
I just processed memberships. And that was where I first met Eleanor Criswell.
Oh, yeah.
She was elected president of AHP while I was there.
And she's here in Novato.
Yeah, and she was director of the Humanistic Psychology Institute. And she actually decided, she had too many irons in the fire. She was on the faculty up at Sonoma State, was one of the founders of the humanistic psych movement up there. Mm-hmm. And of course, she was married to Thomas Hanna.
Right.
Who became very important in my life later on.
And for our viewers, he developed a field called somatics and wrote a book.
Well, yeah, he didn't develop the field so much as he named it.
Right.
Yeah, he came up with the definition that somatics was the living body as experienced from within, as opposed to I can only see you third person. But both the somatics and the Feldenkrais method, honored the first person experience.
And what were the roots? Who did he study with? And was this Reich or what were his?
Well, he was a philosopher. primarily. He was chairman of the graduate philosophy department at the University of Florida, Gainesville, for 12 or 13 years. And then he got burnt out on academia and moved to Novato and founded the Novato Institute along with Eleanor. And he had written a book, two books, one called Bodies in Revolt, because his philosophy was sort of body oriented. And that I can't remember the other one. But anyway, it was an overview of people who would end up at Esalen teaching, you know, and people like Feldenkrais and that I can't even remember the other names now. But Feldenkrais was the most important one to me.
Will Schutz would have probably been in there, and
yeah,
George Leonard, and they were all body oriented. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I remember Will was a friend of yours because we did a retreat at his house one time out at Muir Beach, I think.
Yeah, I didn't remember that we did that. I spent a lot of time at his house, but I didn't remember a retreat there. Wow.
Yeah. There was a wellness retreat there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And he was there with...
actually, he wasn't there that weekend.
Oh.
He loaned you the house.
Oh, okay.
While he was gone. Yeah, I never met him. I saw him around town, around Mill Valley, driving his Mustang convertible.
Right, a red Mustang convertible, right.
Right. So what else do you want to know?
Well, a little more about AHP, since that was a crucial player in the game that preceded our work. And who was I know Regina, who connected me through AHP, or I met her at the Rocky Mountain, but the woman who was in charge of, I'm trying to remember, Liz, I think.
Yeah.
Campbell.
I can't remember Liz's last name now, but she was
Campbell, I think.
She ran the place at the time. And we had a staff of probably 8 or 9 or 10 people. And they had the big thing was we had an annual conference every year, of course, and that's where I found out about the Wellness Resource Center.
Was someone there from the conference? I went to one of theirs in Seattle back probably 76.
I assumed that's where I met you first, or heard about you or something.
Do you remember where it was?
I just don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah, because I was, when I first went to work at AHP, the job was a 5-day-a-week job, but I'm pretty good at improving systems and that, so I got it down to about 3 days a week. So then I had this spare time, so one of the things that I was just intrigued by the Wellness Resource Center. So I just went over and knocked on the door, and Annie, I forget, gave me something to do, and then eventually hired me.
Right. Yeah. I remember you volunteered and it made yourself indispensable, and we had to hire you. So
yeah. And then, we would have those conferences, I think mainly about preventing burnout in the helping professions. That was one of the ways we raised money.
Yeah.
Having those conferences. And
I think I saw you in the audience of the Dan Rather interview.
Yes, I was there. So my face was on 60 Minutes, but I
Yeah.
never said anything. Yeah, I remember watching you and Dan Rather walking on the grounds of
Right.
that play. I couldn't even find my way to that place now, but I remember going there.
Uh-huh. Well, it was
And
Ralston
that
Height
was,
Retreat for any viewers, and it's you go up West Blythedale till it turns into Ralston, and keep going until you hit the sign for Ralston White Retreat. And
okay.
I used to
And
live next door to it.
yeah, and I think that's the same weekend you met Marin.
No, that was later.
Was
That
it?
was uh, in April, I think, or in the spring, and then uh, our last retreat was up there in August, and
Hmm.
you were there, and Marin was there, and not very many other people. It was a small crowd,
Yeah,
and
was Skip there that time?
no, I don't think so. Skip was at earlier ones. I remember when he met Joy, he announced that he was going to marry her, and he did.
Yeah, yeah,
Good old Skip. Uh,
yeah.
and um, let's see. So, what were your first impressions when you came to 42 Miller? And you say you met Annie, but let's talk about some of the people and your experiences since they're either dead or unavailable.
Yeah, well, uh, one of the things was just how much, what a different kind of group it was than what I was used to being around. And I really liked it a lot. Everybody was very accepting of everybody else. And I loved our Friday afternoon, uh, meetings, staff
Mhm.
meetings we'd have where uh, mostly we weren't allowed to talk about work, but just what was going on in our lives.
Yeah, a little history on that was that when Kenneth and Linda were still there, and Bobby had just come on, we were pretty dysfunctional, and I felt like the stern daddy burned out because I had to figure out how to get enough money to pay everybody. And I think it was Bobby, no, Kenneth had the idea. He knew this guy in Forest Knolls, can't think of his name, that did family therapy.
Yeah, I remember that guy, but I can't remember his name
Right.
either.
And we went up to his place once for a retreat. But he brought in this guy whose name is still escaping me, and he did a family sculpting with us. Do you remember that on the couch where we formed a sculpture, and I was sitting on the back of the couch, the big daddy, and my children, and their various relationships. It made it really clear what was going on, and none of us really wanted that. And we did maybe 3 or 4 more sessions with him. And then we realized we could do this ourselves. And that's when we instituted Friday afternoons. We knocked off an hour early so people got paid for an hour and then they contributed an hour. I think we started at 4 and went till 6. And we started doing our work because I'd had training in TA therapy, and we were already doing a lifestyle evolution group with clients. And we were doing staff meetings, and Joy and Bobby all had experience with that. So that was our Friday afternoon meeting. Then we'd often go out to dinner to Jenny Lowe's or somewhere as a group.
And
So
sometimes the meetings, you know, usually the meetings were in the big room upstairs,
yeah,
but once in a while we'd meet in the hot tub.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
And so talk more about what your personal relationships were like with the various staff. Like, let's start with Annie, who was not quite, but soon to be George Leonard's new wife. And they were together, what, 20 or 30 years before they both died.
Yeah, well, she was involved at that time when I met her with Mark.
Yes,
Uh, I can't remember Mark's last name, but
Mark Caskey, and I've interviewed him already, so
okay,
readers can look him up because, yeah, he was he founded the Fort Mason Foundation and
yeah,
ran that, right?
and just Annie was just friendly, and who I really connected though with the most with, I think, was Bobby.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
The
and
heart of the operation. I was the head, she was the heart.
yep, and I really liked Joy. She was so different than anybody I'd ever known before. She was, of course, highly intelligent, but she was also, she was just curious about stuff, and very, whatever she did, she was very good at.
Yeah.
I remember her doing some workshops for us, and uh, I just was impressed with how well she how comfortable she was with herself. And I was also very impressed with you and how, because at the time when I first went to work there, you and she were a couple, and you broke up soon after I joined the Wellness Resource Center, and you made a big point of everybody to not let you play victim,
Mm-hmm.
and that really impressed me.
Uh-huh.
And I liked Michael a lot. Uh, he was somewhat irresponsible, in a way, he, and I can't even remember exactly why I think have that impression of him, but it just seemed part of who he was.
Yeah, this is Michael Baker, Makel,
Now,
I think he spelled
now
it.
Michael.
Yeah, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was somewhat of a flamboyant character. He was doing biofeedback after Linda left. What happened with our family therapy groups was that Linda and Kenneth both decided that they wanted me to be the dad, I think, is what it was. And I didn't want to be the dad. So they didn't want to take full responsibility for the partnership that we eventually created. And they both left. And Michael came in to do the biofeedback after that. So, and then Pam came before Michael. Was she there when you were there, Pam?
No, no,
Trying to think. She was
never.
only there a year.
I did get to know Kenneth and Linda, especially Kenneth, quite well. And it's frustrating. I keep trying to find him and can't. So,
Yeah, boy, he's if he's still alive, he's certainly eluded.
yeah.
You
Well,
get
last I
copies of
heard, he was in, I think, Nova Scotia.
yeah, upstate New York and Nova Scotia, and he wrote Water in the Lake, and you get copies of that come up. But
I've got 3 copies myself.
I had 2. I think I gave one away, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I looked them up. They're, I think they sell for $250 or so.
yeah, yeah. If anyone buys them, I've
Yeah.
seen one of my Wellness for Helping professional books was over $900, but
Oh,
at the same time, there were a lot of them for 30, $30 or $40. So I don't know what they're thinking.
yeah.
They
So,
used to be $2. I bought a bunch of them at $2 and
uh-huh.
we sold them. So say more about Bobby, because she really was a gem, and I'd like to
I
capture that.
just, it's hard to, uh, in a way, she was the adventurous one. I mean, eventually she went off on an adventure with Ronald and ended up in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But she introduced me to uh, the Japanese style of cooking. I can't remember what it was called at the time. She made her own soy products. I remember tempeh. That was it.
Hmm.
I remember she made her own tempeh, and uh, you know, she was in a way a homebody. You know, she loved her home, and when you went in to her house, it just felt warm and comfortable and inviting.
Very Torin.
Yeah, yeah. And she also, when I was up at Sonoma State, she I forget, I was taking a sophomore or junior, I think junior level psych class, and a bunch of us students weren't really happy about the teacher and that. So I invited Bobby to give a weekend workshop to us, and boy, everybody really loved her.
Hmm.
And
Don't remember that. Huh.
yeah, and the professor got in trouble in a way for some outsider coming in and sort of taking over his class.
Ah,
So
did it improve after that?
I can't remember.
Mhm.
I mostly I remember Sonoma State is a place I spent about a year and a half there, but then I got, I was going to get a degree in psych since I was doing uh, some informal counseling with people who would come to the resource center and be at the uh, the conferences, but I wasn't really qualified to do any real counseling.
I
And
didn't realize, were you talking to people on the breaks and things? And
yeah, I would just, I would just uh, full of myself in a way of I thought I was sort of wise and knew stuff, so I would share that with people.
uh-huh.
And so anyway, I decided to get my psych degree, and then Feldenkrais decided he'd do one more training in the United States, and that was my first choice. And so I never returned to the university after I went there for, I guess I went for 2 years. And I still have senior status up at Sonoma State, but I'll never finish.
Uh-huh. And where was the Feldenkrais training? Seems to me that was in Napa or somewhere up north.
No, it was in, well, the original one in the Bay Area that Tom Hanna organized was in San Francisco
Uh-huh.
at Lone Mountain College. And he had a little over 60 people in that training. But then the one I did was in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Oh.
And there were a little over 200 of us from all over the world. And because people knew, because of his age, that this was going to be Moshe's last training.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he lived in Israel and had his practice there, but people from Israel came to Amherst to do the training with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we had people from South America and all over Europe, and a few from Mexico, and all over the United States and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And they limited how many people from the West Coast could get in the training. But I knew Jerry Carson, who was in charge of it. And he lived in Mill Valley at the same time I lived in Mill Valley. So I just called him up and said, I hear you're doing another training. Because I found out from Norma Leistico, who was a Feldenkrais practitioner who came to the conference put on by Ken Dykewald over in Berkeley. And I think I was there because you were there, I think.
I remember doing something with Ken. I haven't interviewed him yet, so we haven't tried to pull that out of our memories, but
Yeah, his specialty, if I remember right, was had to do with the aging.
yeah,
And
I think hospice, I think he really started the hospice movement, if I'm remembering right.
I wasn't aware of that, but that sounds right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Norma was there just as a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I was talking to her, and she said, "Oh, Moshe's going to do one more training. He's going to
Hmm.
be back east." So, because I'd never been back east, so I had no desire to go there, and I was a Westerner. And anyway, I called up Jerry, and he said, "Well, everybody's got to submit a biography, but don't worry about it. Send me one, but you're in." So I was one of the first people who was accepted into that training.
Pays to know somebody.
Yep.
Let's go back to your role at the wellness center. One of the things I remember is uh, when we first did the wellness workbook in the 3-ring binder,
Yep.
um, I hired some high school students to collate it. We ran them off on Xerox, and I think we had 1,000 binders printed up, and they were punching holes all over the in the pages and then assembling it. Were you there then when that fiasco occurred and they punched the holes wrongly?
No, that may be why Annie hired me, because
Yeah,
I ended up taking over
but you
that
did
job.
take that over, and well, I think we did 4,000 copies ultimately of it. But
Yeah, well, I sent out a lot of them, and I remember. I know there were two things that we included, and one I know is the little thermometer, but I
mhm.
can't remember what the other one was.
It was Emmett Miller's guided imagery tape called Rainbow
Uh-huh.
something, yeah. And I think we had a lot of other literature we stuck in the pockets too, but the
Yeah.
thermometer and the tape. Later we did the mini course. We had a kit. That's right. We had a kit that included the mini course and what else? Uh, so you assembled those and sent them up. But I also remember you found a printer in East Bay,
Oh, that's right.
and there was some
Who
story about that.
he actually he did it. I think he did a good job for us, but
Yeah,
he also got arrested for counterfeiting money.
yeah, and they weren't good counterfeits apparently.
Yeah, that's right. So uh, I don't know whatever happened. What kind of a sentence or what kind of a deal he made with the government, but uh, anyway, that put him out of business.
Yeah, I remember there was a problem because we had a batch over there at the time, and whether you could get them out because the
I
lockdown
th-
was.
yeah, I think I did.
You did get them out, I
Yeah,
remember.
because he got out on bail or something, so
Yeah,
he was there, and I went over and got him, and say he did a good job,
yeah,
and
at a
gave
better
us a good
price.
price.
Yeah,
I have no idea how I found him.
yeah. Uh, uh, and did we have the warehouse basement over on the corner of Miller and
Yeah,
Throckmorton?
that's where I worked, and I actually, uh, when I moved over to Mill Valley, uh, I think I moved. Well, Joy and I were roommates. I
Right.
remember,
Uh-huh.
and I had all this stuff from. I had this big. We actually did a sleepover meeting or something at my place in San Francisco one time. Uh, but anyway, I had all this stuff and no place to put it. So there was some shelving in behind a wall there in the
Right.
basement, and I put all my stuff there.
Yeah. That was like a dungeon. Uh,
Yes.
when Gay Raymond took over the mail order business, she worked down there for a while, and it was. a windowless basement in downtown Mill Valley.
Yep.
Any other thoughts or memories of our infamous days in the 70s that you can pull out?
No, I just remember always looking forward to going to 42 Miller. It was, the building was wonderful, you know, and it having the hot tub and sauna and
Uh-huh.
shower in the basement were really nice perks. Yeah. And yep, I just remember it as being one of the best times of my life. Just, you know, and it was a real turning point for me.
Uh-huh.
You know, so you and Joy and Bobby were all big influences on my life. And then after that, Moshe Feldenkrais and Thomas Hanna were
Mm-hmm.
the big influences.
Yeah. I just had this other little fleeting memory of, you were one of the first people I knew that had a cell phone. It was a Motorola flip phone. And I remember you whipped it out and I was astounded at this little flip.
Yeah, somehow my cousin had started out. He had those big ones that sort of look like a walkie-talkie.
Right.
He started with one of those, and boy, they were expensive.
Yeah.
And then yeah, somehow I ended up with the Motorola, let's say the flip phone.
Yeah. The
And
earliest one. Yeah.
yeah, and it was uh, pretty sketchy at that time, whether or not, you know, there were so many spots where you couldn't get a signal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, I was, I guess I had moved to uh, Mill Valley at that time when I first got that.
I remember your place in the marina area because I stayed there a couple nights when was I back from Australia? Would that have been in early 2000s?
Yeah, that was that was an apartment building my cousin owned a part of. He was partners with another guy, and
Yeah.
I ended up being the apartment manager,
Uh-huh.
which
What
meant,
years were that? Early 2000s?
well, no, that was the 80s.
Hmm.
No, no, well, actually, it was the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when it was.
Interesting. So just to wrap up with your career with Feldenkrais, you did the training and then you moved into having your own practice and
Yeah, I first shared with two other practitioners a place in uh, San Rafael. And then eventually we split up, and I had a small practice in Mill Valley.
uh-huh.
And I still, you know, most of us came out of that training not feeling very confident because it was a disjointed kind of training because we only had Moshe for the first 2 years. And during that time, there was no hands-on training. The trainings have completely changed now. They start out hands-on fairly early in the training.
Mm.
But back then, Moshe was still figuring out how to train people. He
Mm.
had, you know, he knew the work. He knew how to work with people and help them. And he'd had this group in Tel Aviv that he had taught the awareness through movement lessons for years and years. And he had this core group that came, I think it was on Fridays. And every Friday they'd be there. And eventually they talked him into, there was 12 or 13 of them. They talked him into teaching them the hands-on work.
Hmm.
And mostly he'd show them something and then have them work on him. And but they had a lot of background because they'd all been say taking his group classes for 10 or more years.
Hmm.
So he had that group, and then Tom Hanna uh, talked him into doing the training at Lone Mountain, because Moshe had one other offer. He had an offer from uh, now I've lost his name. Anyway, he was the name will come to me in a minute. He was going to put up the money for Moshe to work with one of the brain researchers down at Stanford. And God, who was that? You did his workshops. Everybody was. I never did any of his workshops, but a lot of people did.
At Stanford.
No, no, this is in San Francisco, and he founded the Hunger Project.
Oh, Werner Erhard. Yeah.
Werner Erhard, that was it. Okay,
That's training.
so
Yeah.
Werner Erhard was going to put up the money. He knew about Moshe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it would have been good for Moshe to do that, but it wouldn't have spread his work.
Mm-hmm.
So when Tom came along and said, well, I can get you a couple hundred students or something, and they'll pay you all this money. So Moshe said, yeah, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then Tom, he almost didn't come because Tom only got a little over 60 people.
Mm.
And, but anyway, he, with that group, the first 2 years was just the awareness of movement, the group work. And
Mm-hmm.
once in a while, he'd give a demonstration of his hands-on work, but he wouldn't allow them to do it.
Mm.
And he wanted them to really get it in their own body first,
Mm.
before they started putting their hands on people.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And
Well, that reminds me, Judith Aston rented the downstairs at 42 Miller later on, and her Aston patterning was a takeoff on Feldenkrais,
Rolfing,
wasn't it? Yeah.
no, yeah, she was one of Ida Rolf's
Oh, Rolf. Yes, that was Rolf. Yeah.
primary assistants.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who developed the movement part of the Rolfing.
Mm-hmm.
And she was actually my second choice. If I hadn't done the training with Moshe, I was going to see if I could train with Judith,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been a convenience since she was right there in the same building we were.
Yeah.
Instead, I went all the way across country to Amherst, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So anyway, then at the end of our second year of training, Moshe got sick and was never able to teach again.
Mm.
He started having a series of mini strokes and that. And so then it was the third year was Moshe appointed half a dozen or so of the people that he had trained in Israel to come and be trainers for us. And so it was training by committee, and some of them didn't like each other.
Mm.
And so that third year was sort of a mess. And then they gave us the option. They said, well, Moshe can't travel all this way. It'd be too hard on him. But we think maybe he could teach if the students come to Israel. So they gave us the choice of they'd still have the training in Amherst, And they'd also have a simultaneous training, which they'd start like 2 weeks earlier in Israel. And so I was going to go to Israel. I didn't know how I was going to get the money, but I was going to go. And as the time got closer, it became obvious Moshe was not going to be able to teach.
Mm.
So I decided not to go to Israel. And so I went to Amherst, and about half the people went to Israel, and about half of us met in Amherst.
So he did go ahead and do it in Israel then.
No, he didn't.
Oh.
No, I said when it became obvious to me that he was not going to be able to teach, it was still going to be the same trainers.
Uh-huh.
They just fly him back and forth between Tel Aviv and Amherst.
Yeah.
And but they were a little better organized for that fourth year. And so anyway, I came out of that training still not very confident. And it took several years for me to really feel confident. And I had no idea how to teach the group classes. I understood what they were about. I just wasn't comfortable being in front of a group teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to get comfortable. And now it's no problem for me. I can teach a class, just walk in and make it up if I need to, and it goes fine.
Mm-hmm. And how has it affected your own body and life? What personal?
Well, I had a spinal fusion when I was 21 years old back in
really?
1963.
Oh.
And the lower L4-5 to the sacrum. And I just I had a lot of back pain. And I remember the first day I typed a book for you, and spending all that time at the typewriter was killing my back. But after that first summer of the training, sitting at the typewriter for hours didn't kill my back anymore.
I forgot you were a good typist. That was the old Blue Selectric, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I took that thing to Costa Rica and eventually sold it. They converted it to Spanish.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got my K-Pro computer. I didn't need it anymore, but yeah, that old Blue Electric.
So anyway, most likely, if I hadn't got into the Feldenkrais method, or maybe if I'd trained with Judith Aston, it would have turned out the same way for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I expect, if I hadn't got into body work, my old age would be quite painful.
Mm-hmm.
As it is, I don't live a pain-free life, but I never stay in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and I have the patience to just, most of the time, my body will just figure it out, my nervous system. And
Do you do specific Feldenkrais maneuvers when you're in pain and that removes
well, I do things that I learned through Feldenkrais, but I also do things that I learned through Somatics.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'm the only person that trained personally with Feldenkrais, with Thomas Hanna, and with Anat von Yell, who I think, and it's just a personal opinion, but I think is probably the most, accomplished Feldenkrais practitioner and trainer out there.
I don't know this person. Who is it?
Anat von Yell.
Yeah.
She's probably the best in the world at working with children with special needs.
Uh-huh.
And she does trainings, and she usually cuts them off at 90 people. and they're all paying her $3,000, $3,500 or so and she does 10 segments, and they pay her that much for each one of those segments. And then she does more segments on how to work specifically with the children, and how to work with the aging population, and how to work with high achievers.
Hmm.
And because she's worked with top athletes and top musicians and conductors and CEOs of big companies, and that she was the youngest trainee of his when she was at the San Francisco training.
Uh-huh.
When Moshe appointed trainers, there were about half a dozen or so from Israel and 2 from the San Francisco training, and Anat was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was Jerry Carson. And Anat eventually went out on her own, and she still honors Moshe and talks about him a lot, but she calls it the Anat Vaniel method instead of the Feldenkrais method now.
Mm-hmm. How do you spell her last name? Vaniel?
Vanya, it's like Daniel, only with the B instead of the D.
Oh, okay.
So it's Vaniel.
And she's in San Francisco still, or where?
Well, she's in San Rafael, but she grew up in Israel.
Uh-huh.
She's been in San Rafael for many years.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm surrounded. I got her in San Rafael and Eleanor in Novato.
Yeah.
I'm halfway in between.
You should check out, maybe go find out when Anat's doing a training and see if you could just drop in for a day or two and observe, because they generally allow that.
Okay. Well, any other final or parting words of wisdom from a fellow Wellness Resource Center?
I can't think of any. I just living my life here. I sort of got stuck back in Coeur d'Alene because my parents needed me to keep themselves out of having to go to assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came back to Coeur d'Alene to take care of them till they died. And mother made it to 92 and dad made it to 100.
Wow.
They were married 71 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and mother was never in a hospital in her life until the last few days of her life.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well done.
So
wellness death, it sounds like, which is what Bobby exemplified too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
It's been great reconnecting after these years, and my best to you, and keep up the good work, and hope you'll be able to resume your practice once the COVID breakdown is over. And
yeah, me too. Thank you, John.
Okay.